Hi all, and welcome back to the neighborhood. We're doing a follow-up video on the HzSound Waist Drum. Again, this is a weird name, but a great sounding IEM. So let's get into it. I covered the build a bit in the initial impressions video, but we'll get more into detail here. The waist drum is a small, bullet-style metal shell with a 2-pin connection. The cable these come with is somewhat on the thin side, but flows unbelievably well, and is one of my favorite cables ever. It's covered in a silky smooth PU sheath, has nice small metal hardware, and terminates in a right-angled 3.5mm jack. Oh, and the 2-pin connectors are equally as tiny as the IEM, but made out of plastic rather than metal to accommodate this. And I've harped on other companies in the past for using plastic chin sliders, so I want to applaud HzSound here for using a metal one that integrates into the cable and slides up and down the cable itself with ease, always maintaining the appropriate amount of tension. If I had one criticism of the build, it would be that there's no way to tell the left and right IEMs apart from each other in the dark. There's no identifying ridge on the IEM or the cable either, and it's even hard to tell them apart in the daytime as well, as the only identifying markings indicating left or right are screen printed on the underbelly of the shell itself near the 2-pin connection. Like other IEMs, a small raised dot on one side of the shell or cable could have been used to signify left and right, and this was a notable oversight by HzSound, at least from an ease of use functionality perspective. Instead, I find myself turning on the lights and squinting to see which side is which, as the print on the underbelly of the IEM is also markedly small and hard to read. The driver inside the shell isn't particularly noteworthy either, at least on paper. It's just listed as a 6mm microdynamic. Nevertheless, this thing is implemented superbly well, and the decision to go with a rear vented cavity does improve its performance. There's not a lot of well-implemented open back IEMs period, and many of these don't even sound open, but the HzSound Waist Drum is implemented really well, does sound open, and I'm amazed to say only cost around $35. One thing to note, however, is that this design choice also comes with a cost. The waist drum does not isolate well, and it's not a good IEM for someone who cannot listen in a quiet listening environment. Over the past few months, I've taken this IEM around with me everywhere, and I've listened a few times in my car, for example, and even then, there was a notable drop in audio quality due to interference from outside noise. So despite its small portable size, I would not recommend the waist drum to someone who commutes on a noisy bus or something like that. With that said, in a quiet listening environment, the waist drum does benefit from its open back design. The soundstage is large and natural feeling, with both quality depth and width. Sonic images articulate themselves well and also separate themselves well in its stage. Image placement was also wonderful. Timbre is ever so slightly warm, but mostly neutral. The waist drum is extremely pleasing to the ear, and I think this IEM will be a crowd pleaser to those audiophiles that give it a try. The waist drum is everything that I expected the Blonde BL03 to be that IEM couldn't deliver. Given the Blonde BL03 is still roughly the same price as the waist drum, and the fact that the waist drum actually comes with a decent accessory package, I hope that more people will start recommending the waist drum to others who are looking for a generally pleasing IEM in this price range, as it's truly the superior product between the two. Speaking of its accessory package, I almost forgot to mention that the waist drum comes with a blue jean style carry bag, a set of additional filters, and 3 different sets of ear tips, which should meet most people's needs. I would have liked HzSound to have included the same case that came with the heart mirror, but for the price, I think the package that HzSound has put together here is still very reasonable. In terms of the tips themselves, I did find some sonic differences between them. The clear translucent ear tips offered the most relaxed sound, while the solid gray tips produced a slight V-shaped sound with additional low-end presence and some additional treble energy compared to the clear tips. HzSound also included black ear tips which appeared to be Final Audio Type E clones. These tips resulted in a mostly even presentation, but also possessed the most treble emphasis out of the tips in the box. I preferred the Type E clones myself, but would recommend the clear tips to most. With regard to the general sound profile, these are not bass cannons, and there is some notable roll-off in the low bass and sub-bass, I presume at least in part to the Waist Drum's open back design. With that said, I also do believe that there is enough bass here for most. Not only that, but the bass is rather musical and sufficiently detailed to boot. It's not as detailed as the bass of an SSR with RHA dual density ear tips, but it's certainly more detailed in comparison to HzSound's own heart mirror. I'd also go so far as to say that the quality of the bass here is just as detailed as anything else under $100 right now. I even dusted off the Tin Hi-Fi T3 Plus, the Blonde A8, and both Jade Audio EA3 and EA1 to compare. Nevertheless, the primary character of the bass here is mid-bass driven, but it's not one that is overly bloated, overly dynamic, or bleeds into the rest of the mix. The mid-range and treble are more detailed than the bass, however, and this is where the Waist Drum truly shines. Mid and treble details jump out to the listener, without ever being too far forward to the ear in either their presence or intensity. The sound here is detailed but relatively smooth, without ever being overly smoothed over or compressed either. And there's absolutely no sign of any form of sibilance or harsh character. Listeners of the Waist Drum will just kind of soak up its sounds as they jump out to the ear in a very pleasing, pleasant, and acceptable way. Graphs of the Waist Drum don't really depict it well or do it sufficient justice, but to the ear, it mostly comes across as balanced, agreeable, and entertaining in its sound signature with luxurious mids and splendid treble. The vocal presence of the Waist Drum is also gratifying. Vocals have a certain amount of richness to their tones and a quality to their character, which mostly flows in a similar pattern to the rest of the mid-range and treble presentation. They are sufficiently prominent in the mix, but if you're an audiophile that requires a strong vocal forwardness, I might suggest the Moondrop Chew instead, as that set will alternatively focus more on highlighting vocals and vocal attributes in comparison to the Waist Drum. In contrast, vocals on the Waist Drum are a much more cohesive affair, as is its general sound. Furthermore, in a quiet, unimpeded listening environment, the resolution of the Waist Drum is both surprising and terrific. For $35, I really couldn't ask for more, and I think it's safe to say that the Waist Drum is one of the best IEMs under $100 right now. With that said, these aren't going to out-resolve more expensive sets beyond the $100 price point. In conclusion, the Waist Drum is one of my favorite IEMs at the moment. I think it's a huge step up from HzSound's own heart mirror and will most likely be a huge hit to anyone who gives it a listen. While its tiny size suggests portability, it's really only for those that can go from quiet listening environment to quiet listening environment, as its open back design has both upsides and downsides. Even so, I think HzSound has put together quite the sonic package here, and at an incredible price, as the Waist Drum is certainly worth much more than its price tag would suggest. Its name may be odd, but its sound certainly isn't. And before I go, I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the support that you guys give to the channel. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure that you consider doing so. It really helps the channel grow and be able to give you the most accurate reviews in the future. Also, consider following the channel at all its other access locations. Links will be provided to these locations in the description below, but there's a Twitter, Instagram, there's www.InToItReviews.com, there's a Discord, and there's a Patreon. What the Patreon gets you is access to early written reviews that I generally post before I make the videos. So if you're interested on my first take of any products, you'll find it there on the Patreon. And with that, I'm out for now.